Thank you for your interest in this presentation, and thank you to KPEDD for giving us the opportunity to participate in this virtual event. This presentation is about an ongoing study of the Kenai Peninsula Borough economy covering the years 2008 to 2020 that Northern Economics and Industrial Economics are conducting for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM. The purpose of this presentation is to promote awareness about the study, especially among the organizations and communities in the KPB region. We welcome any thoughts from viewers regarding data or resources that may be useful for our study so that we can ensure that the study results presented to BOEM characterizing the KPB reflect the best possible available up-to-date information. Specifically, we are compiling historical, socioeconomic information and documenting the trends and challenges that have occurred in your region over the last 12 years. We appreciate any assistance stakeholders and community groups in the KPB region are able to provide regarding data, relevant studies, or insights on the different components of the KPB economy. I will talk more about the focus and objectives of the study throughout this presentation. In this brief presentation, I will cover the following: the overall context and rationale for this study from BOEM's perspective, the specific objectives of the study, the scope of analysis, that is, with respect to the geographic scope, time frame of the analysis, or temporal scope, and the analytical scope, or study components, the activities or tasks that we are doing for the study, and the schedule for conducting our work. And finally, our contact information in case you would like to provide any comment or information that you think would be useful for this study. The next 5 slides will give you some general context for the study. As I mentioned earlier, this is a study commissioned by BOEM. BOEM is the federal agency that is responsible for managing the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS areas, or you may think of it as U.S. federal waters as opposed to state waters. State jurisdiction is from the shoreline out to 3 nautical miles. The OCS includes the area between state jurisdiction, or state waters, to 200 nautical miles from shore. Federal law through the OCS Lands Act requires the Secretary of the Interior to conduct environmental studies to obtain information pertinent to sound leasing decisions, as well as to monitor the human, marine, and coastal environments that are impacted by activities in the OCS areas. In support of BOEM's efforts to base its management decisions on the best available science, the agency funds research studies that help inform the environmental assessments and economic analysis required by the OCS Lands Act and other relevant statutes, including, for example, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. These BOEM studies are also used by other federal, state, and local agencies, by researchers in the nation's universities, and by the private sector in the context of resource planning, management, and analysis. This study is being developed under BOEM's Environmental Studies Program. The Environmental Studies Program group at BOEM develops, funds, and manages scientific research specifically to inform policy decisions on the development of energy and mineral resources on the Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS. The ESP has provided over $1 billion for research to this end since the program began in 1973. Research areas covered by the ESP include, among others, physical oceanography, biology, protected species, environmental effects, cultural resources, subsistence activities, and socioeconomics. Example studies include, in 2005, ESP funded a similar study to this one, focused on the North Slope economy from 1965 to 2005. Other studies include a study on bowhead whales, and in the Lower Cook Inlet area, a GPS tagging study of seabirds. A number of studies funded under ESP have been conducted in the Cook Inlet area. These are a few of the more recent ones, including a study looking at nearshore food web structure and a coastal community vulnerability index. I've mentioned the Cook Inlet OCS planning area. It is actually one of 15 OCS planning areas managed by BOEM in Alaska alone. Among all the OCS regions in the U.S., which includes the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico, the Alaska OCS region is the largest and has the longest coastlines and the deepest water. The northeastern part of the region contains the Beaufort Sea, which is part of the Arctic Ocean. Traveling counterclockwise, one passes through the broad Chukchi Sea into the narrow and shallow Bering Strait. South of the Bering Strait is the ecologically productive Bering Sea. The Aleutian Island chain forms the southern border of the Bering Sea. To the east of the Aleutian Island chain is the Gulf of Alaska, some 3,000 to 4,000 meters deep, an ecologically productive part of the northern Pacific Ocean. Zooming in on the Cook Inlet, the OCS planning area, which, as I've mentioned, occurs in federal waters, is shown with the red boundary in the lower Cook Inlet. You may be more familiar with the oil and gas activities in the state waters within Upper Cook Inlet. There are several existing oil and gas units in state waters managed by the DNR, including, among others, Redoubt, Kitchen Lights, and Trading Bay. Within the federal OCS area, there are 14 tracts highlighted red. These are active leases, all owned by Hilcorp. Hilcorp is currently in the process of data collection via seismic and geologic surveys. However, there has not been any petroleum development in this area to date. BOEM sources identify 13 exploration wells drilled in the inlet's federal waters between 1978 and 1985, but all have since been plugged. Hilcorp acquired the 14 leases during the last federal lease sale that was conducted in 2017. According to BOEM estimates, the federal waters of Cook Inlet contain 810 million barrels of oil and 330 cubic feet of natural gas that could be produced given the right economic conditions. Earlier this year, President Biden issued Executive Order 14008 titled Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad. Among other things, this order directs federal agencies to, quote, pause new oil and gas leases on federal lands or in offshore waters pending completion of a comprehensive review and reconsideration of federal oil and gas permitting and leasing practices. Now I'm going to discuss the four main objectives of our study. Our first objective is to establish a baseline, a basis for assessing social and economic effects to the KPB of future onshore and offshore energy development activities. Baseline information provides context by which future effects can be compared. To illustrate this idea, let's imagine we are looking at the tax revenue data for a fictional community. For the period up through 2020, we would have historical data. That is, we have the actual revenue numbers. Going forward into the forecast period, we would use those numbers to predict a likely trend. This trend would be the baseline, what we can reasonably predict based on what has happened before. Then, say we want to look at the projected revenues from a proposed project. The baseline provides the context to compare the project-generated revenues against. That is, what would happen with the project as opposed to what would happen without it. Our second objective is to develop a community-level analysis of the trends in population, economy, and institutions in the Kenai Peninsula region. With community-level data, we will be able to look at how the communities in the KPB have changed and adapted over the years. For example, has there been a shift in the types of jobs people hold in Seldovia, Nikiski, or Port Graham? Has there been a change in the age composition of the population in a community? Is Homer or Kenai turning into a retirement community? Has the oil and gas industry affected any of the communities in the region in the last 12 years? Since socioeconomic data at the community level are not as readily available as regional or borough level data, we will be reaching out to various research agencies and regional stakeholders to request information. Our third objective is to evaluate the influence of key events over the 2008 to 2020 timeframe on the KPB economy. This timeline shows some, but by no means all, of the key events of socioeconomic significance in the KPB region over this timeframe. There was the closure of the Agrium plant in 2007, which caused a significant drop in employment in the manufacturing sector in the KPB from 2007 to 2008. And 2008 was also when the global financial crisis happened, causing the global recession. Toward the end of 2015, the LNG facility in Nikiski stopped exporting natural gas to Asian markets, and at about the same time there was a plunge in oil prices that precipitated a recession in Alaska. Then, of course, a pandemic hit the world in 2020, and that same year the North Pacific Fishery Management Council decided to close the salmon driftnet fishery in the federal waters of Cook Inlet. Our fourth objective is to evaluate the role of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, or ANCSA, regional and village corporations in the KPB as a force for economic development and delivery of public services. ANCSA, for those who are not familiar, was enacted by the U.S. Congress in 1971. The act divided the state into 12 distinct regions and mandated the creation of 12 private for-profit Alaska Native regional corporations and over 200 private for-profit Alaska Native village corporations, which are owned by enrolled Alaska Native shareholders. As you can see, there are a number of corporations based in the KPB or that provide services to communities in the region. 2 of the 12 ANCSA regional corporations, Siri and Chugach, are connected to the Kenai Peninsula region, and there are 9 village corporations based in the region. I am now going to talk about the scope of our analysis. This map shows our geographic scope. We are looking at the Kenai Peninsula Borough region and all the communities within the KPB boundary. There are 6 incorporated cities, shown as red dots and bold text, and 31 census-designated places within the KPB. As you will recall, our analysis will cover the years from 2008 to 2020. For this study, we are looking at the KPB economy in terms of 4 different aspects. KPB communities, the people and businesses in local communities. The government, which includes the KPB regional government and the 6 incorporated jurisdictions or cities. The ANCSA Native corporations in the KPB, and the different industries or economic sectors that make up the economy. There are a broad range of economic sectors to be considered in any economy. Sectors in the KPB include oil and gas, healthcare, recreation, fisheries, transportation, trade and services, agriculture, construction, and subsistence. To achieve our study's objectives, we have 2 major tasks or activities. Task 1 is the community or stakeholder outreach efforts, which include collaboration with KPEDD, reaching out to entities in the region that may be able to provide information for our study, and at the end of the study, we will present our study results to a to-be-determined conference or public meeting. Task 2 is the data collection effort. We are collecting data from different entities, including state and federal agencies, research organizations, industry groups, and economic development entities, and we are also requesting data from the Native regional and village corporations. This slide gives you an idea of the kinds of socioeconomic data we are collecting for the study. We are looking at population, employment, income, fiscal data, housing data, visitation estimates, and others. Earlier, I mentioned the different ANCSA corporations and village corporations in the KPB region. For those corporations, we are hoping to get employment, income, and information on dividends. As for our timeline, we started the project in December, and we have until September of next year to complete the study with the submission of the final report. Our community engagement efforts will continue until the end of the study with the presentation of results. Data collection efforts will continue into the first quarter of 2022, so we can prepare our draft report for May of 2022. So who can benefit from this study? BOEM, of course, intends to use this study as a reference for future EISs and other types of environmental assessments for lease sales or exploration and development activities in the KPB. Other users, such as the Alaska DNR, the regional and local governments, and other state and federal agencies can use the study for comprehensive economic development plans, management plans, or for economic impact assessments. Future researchers can also benefit from the socioeconomic data this study will collect. This study will also help identify any information gaps for possible future studies. Finally, let me introduce our team. The BOEM project manager is Jeffrey Brooks. The prime contractor is Industrial Economics, led by Maura Flight and Eric Horsch. And at Northern Economics, we have Leah Aquino, Don Shug, and Terry McCoy. If you have any information that you would like to share with our team, you can contact us at the email addresses shown here. Thank you for viewing this presentation, and again, many thanks to KPEDD for giving us the opportunity to participate in this virtual event.